There's lots of social justice in this church. It's very social justice oriented, so there are so many opportunities to be a part of being the change we wish to see in the world.
There's not one God, one set God, or any set God, and you sort of have your own freedom of religion, and you get to think what you want and believe what you want.
You're almost always contributing in this church, and it just kind of feels good to like be a part of a community where you can actually help to reach a common goal.
We celebrate other holidays that maybe come from other religions, such as like Easter and Christmas, and we celebrate them, but in our own way. It's like Christmas with a twist, or like Easter with a twist.
Everyone is special and treat people fairly and kindly. Like, that's really just what we are meant to do and what we're here at UU for.
Is it a religion? Is it a faith? Is it a community where everyone espouses and acts on the same moral value system? Is it an eclectic group of people from Christian, Jewish, atheist, humanist, and other backgrounds who join together, share and wrestle with timely issues? Is it all of the above? The answers depend on who you ask at First Parish of Bedford, and it depends on how you define these terms. Unitarian Universalism cannot be pigeonholed into any of the usual constructs of religion. They don't espouse a belief in a particular deity or anything supernatural, nor do they have a particular scripture. They are a humanist tradition which draws from a wide variety of sources. Their principles are based on reason, freedom, love, and respect for all people. They are an activist congregation which believes that sometimes you have to resist the law of the land in order to live up to your values. Today I will speak with Reverend John Gibbons, a long-serving minister of First Parish who has led his congregation by example. He will give us a tour of First Parish. We will see snippets of their unique services. The junior youth group will teach us about Unitarian Universalist principles. We will hear from social justice leaders about their numerous initiatives, including becoming a Level 1 sanctuary for undocumented immigrants who are in imminent danger of deportation. Welcome to Spiritually Speaking.
Though the time be far, I know that come it will, when each nation shall each other bless, and peace the earth shall fill. God shall reign over the earth on that day. God shall be one, and your name it shall be one.
John, it's a pleasure to have you with me this afternoon, and I'm so glad that you could join us for our program. I thought I would start by asking you how you came to be a minister at First Parish.
I actually grew up in the Chicago area and attended a Unitarian, then Unitarian Universalist church that was very humanist and unusual. I grew up largely in the suburbs, and this was an urban church, and I was exposed to people of different races and ideas and beliefs. And I came east to go to college, and for a while after college I worked in social work in Boston, and then I decided that it looked like a ministry to me, and the local trade school for particularly Unitarian Universalist ministers is the Harvard Divinity School, which was originally Unitarian and is, of course, much more diverse and eclectic now. They have a 3-year Masters of Divinity program, which is the basic degree program for parish ministers, so that I have an MDiv, and there also is a denominational process of accreditation that is administered by the Unitarian Universalist Association. So after attending HDS, I served a rural congregation in southern Worcester County in Mendon and Uxbridge, Massachusetts, and after 10 years there I was called to First Parish in Bedford.
Wonderful. And so what is Unitarian Universalism?
Unitarian Universalism doesn't fit into many of the usual pigeonholes of religion. And so we're not Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish. We are a none of the above kind of tradition that draws from a variety of sources. Unitarian Universalists don't gather on the basis of shared beliefs, but more on the basis of shared values. And most important of those values are the values of freedom, the freedom of belief, as well as the freedom of unbelief. No one tells you what you must believe. Secondly, the use of reason in religion. We don't ask anyone to believe something that is offensive to their sense of reason or unbelievable. You don't need to check your brains at the door. And third, the value of toleration, or the radical welcoming of those who are different from ourselves. Many, perhaps most of our congregation, come to us out of different traditions, and they often hang on to a piece of that in one way or another, whether it be Catholic or Protestant or Jewish. We have a great many atheists in our congregation, and again, most would probably call themselves humanist.
Could you define humanist for me?
Yeah, humanist comes out of what would be called natural religion rather than supernatural religion. We do not believe in a supernatural deity. We think that the earth and the universe are fundamental to our existence, and we don't rely on revealed religion. We don't have one particular scripture that we adhere to. Perhaps I should explain that these were originally two separate denominations, the Unitarian denomination and the Universalist denomination, and they both come out of what would be called the left wing of the Protestant Reformation. And they were part of that Enlightenment period in the 18th century where scientific and intellectual principles were being applied to all kinds of disciplines. The Unitarians looked at the Bible, for example, and did not find references to the Trinity, and thus they were called Unitarians. And that was a heresy, and many of them were burned at the stake for their trouble. Do I believe in God? Well, what do you mean by God when you ask the question? Worship might be another one. People might recoil and say, worship sounds like bowing down. To whom are we bowing down? But again, that's a question of authority. And I do believe there are important sources of authority. There are important values of love and compassion that we ought try to adhere to.
How do holidays play a role in your faith, and how do you choose which holidays to observe and which ones not to?
I don't think that Unitarian Universalism has distinctive, unique holidays. We exist in a cultural context, and so we often observe the holidays that are being observed in the broader culture, and often those are Christian in origin, such as Christmas and Easter. But at Christmas, we aren't necessarily celebrating the birth of the Son of God, but rather we may be talking about issues of immigration and refugees. We try to universalize and figure out what the meaning of the holiday is and put it in a relevant context to our day.
Thank you so much for being here, and let's head over to your church.
Thank you, Rabbi Rocketpower. Welcome to First Parish. I'm glad to have you visit.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'd love to show you around.
Wonderful. Let's go inside.
This is the bell that is in our steeple tower. We ring it before church to remind people when the services will begin. We ring it after people's weddings sometimes in celebration. And of course we ring it whenever the Red Sox win the World Series. So here we are in the sanctuary of First Parish. As I say, this is a 200-year-old building, and we were the very first church to exist in Bedford. We're heirs of the Puritan tradition, and as a result, the interior of the sanctuary is very plain. There are not icons or images of any sort, but the early Puritans favored very plain worship. We have an organ, but in the old days they didn't believe in organs. That was like rock and roll. That was over the top and too much. This room has undergone many changes over the years. Originally there were box pews. They used to have pews that had doors at the end because there was no heat in the building, and people would actually bring their own stoves, coal stoves that would keep their feet warm, and they'd even sometimes in the wintertime bring their dogs to be on their laps. There's an old saying that it is so cold, it is a 3-dog night, meaning it takes 3 dogs to stay warm.
I'd heard the expression but never knew that
that's where it came from.
Wow.
This was the first church in Bedford, and it was the first church of Christ, a clearly Christian church in the early American sense of things. And as such, it was Protestant, and in a Protestant church, the word is central to worship, and therefore the pulpit is a central feature in this sanctuary for the sermon as the center of Sunday worship. Our worship today is different from what it was 25 or 50 years ago, let alone 200 years ago, and I expect will be different from what it will be in another 20, 50, or 100 years. Our Sunday morning service is one that has hymns that are often played on a piano or on an organ and sung by the congregation. They can come from, again, a variety of sources. There are classical music sources and folk and jazz and other kinds of things in our hymnals. The sermon is often the center of our worship, but it really can be a variety of things. We have dramatic presentations on Sunday morning. Sometimes it's the clergy, the ministers, who are making the presentation, but as well we have a number of guest speakers. We can have a number of musical presentations. It can be a very diverse kind of Sunday morning experience.
Can you explain the wall hanging behind you?
We think that wall hangings are more interesting than having a blank wall, and so we have a variety of wall hangings. The one that is here at the moment was one made by a parishioner, and at the center of it you'll see is something called the flaming chalice. A flaming chalice has its origins in the years leading up to the Second World War, when there were Unitarian ministers who went to Europe to help rescue Jews and others from occupied parts of Nazi Germany. In order to assist them in escaping, they needed to have documents and visas, and it was helpful to have a logo on those documents. And a graphic designer from Czechoslovakia designed something called the Flaming Chalice. And it was originally just something that was for documents and stationery, but in more recent years, Unitarian Universalist churches have a variety of these that are characteristically lit every Sunday morning. And it's a symbol of liberation, it's a symbol of freedom, it's a symbol of community, it's a symbol of truth. This is a candle stand, and it's a much more recent innovation in our Sunday morning worship. On Sunday mornings, there is a time in the service when the members are invited to light candles of joy or concern. Ways of getting to know one another on a deeper level. So this is our hymnal that includes hymns or songs that are sung on Sunday morning, but also includes many readings and prayers. And I'm just noticing at random that it includes readings from Gandhi and from Frederick Douglass, from the prophet Amos, from Martin Luther King, from the poet Archibald MacLeish. So here we are in my office, which some people would uncharitably call cluttered and a mess. But
No.
it simply is a reflection of my diverse interests and the eclectic nature of our faith. So we have many symbols and objects from a variety of religious traditions here. We have a singing bowl that we sometimes use on Sunday mornings to start worship. When people gather, they're all noisily chatting away, and when it's time to start, I will ring the bell.
Wow, it's an amazing sound.
And everyone will quiet down very promptly. I see there is a shofar here, but also a Shiva lingam, a symbol out of the Hindu tradition.
Right, so a Jewish symbol.
A Jewish
with
symbol, a Hindu symbol. There is a Buddhist prayer wheel, and monks and other Buddhists will use these in Tibet and in various places. On my desk there is a bust of Thomas Paine, who was an American revolutionary and was once called that filthy little atheist by Theodore Roosevelt, but he has become a bit of a hero of a free-thinking religious tradition. A long-handled offering box, an old one from the 1800s. And part of the worship on Sunday morning is passing the plate for the support of the church. And that's actually an important religious ritual, because we're not supported by the state, we're not supported by a denomination or by any religious authorities, we're only supported by our own members. Here we're in what we call our common room, which is a large social hall, and it's used for many purposes 7 days a week. After services on Sunday, we have community hour. The community is a very important part of our existence as a congregation. We have a rainbow flag that is here, but also on the front of our building, as well as a transgender flag, signifying our being a welcoming congregation to the LGBTQ community, and letting the community know that we want to be a welcoming place.
This is a group of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Our unison affirmation, which is something that we in church say every single week. It's kind of the centerpiece of who we are and who we strive to be as a community. It's something that just is in every single service. It's something that guides us in how we live our life.
Our first principle is everyone is special. Not only are we unique, but we all have like our own way of doing things, and we should always respect that.
Treat people fairly and kindly. I think it's really not fair to treat anyone any differently, no matter their race, gender, or religion.
We all grow by learning. I just grew up here, and I've learned about the history of Unitarian Universalism and the different meanings of the 7 principles.
When you grow in spirit, it's basically kind of like having an empathy, so you know really who you are and how other people are feeling.
Act and vote on your concerns, because your opinion matters here. And in Unitarian Universalism, there's very little judging.
We want to achieve peace on earth, because if you don't help, then nothing's going to get better.
To nature, we are connected. Everything has a circle of life in it.
We have a social responsibility council. This is a group of people who are responsible for funding social action projects. This has been so important to the folks here at First Parish that we actually have a fairly large endowment which is dedicated solely to social responsibility actions.
In 2015, we were responding to the plight of the refugee crisis from Syria, and we heard 2 very moving sermons about the refugee crisis here at home. So we responded to that by forming a task force. We had a vote after a long period of discernment with the congregation and passed a resolution to offer sanctuary in April of 2017. We are charged by our congregation with providing a space to offer sanctuary to someone who is at imminent risk of deportation, and we have created this space as well as become involved in the larger sanctuary movement to help immigrants who are faced with unjust deportation because of our broken immigration laws.
We as Unitarians, one of our first basic principles is we respect the dignity and worth of every single individual, and we have to live our lives with that as a foundation.
When these kinds of things happen, and we feel that the laws of the land are not in concert with our principles, we need to answer to the higher call of our principles. Our faith demands that we work toward a livable climate and to protect those most vulnerable. So we have undergone civil disobedience training and have gone down to many protests.
Here I am in the pulpit at the Unitarian headquarters in Kolozsvár, Transylvania. There have been Unitarians in Transylvania since 1568, when Prince John Sigismund declared himself a Unitarian after the preaching of Francis David Ferenc, whose bust is behind me. David Ferenc said, "Egy az Isten," God is one, and as a result, there was issued the first edict of religious toleration in the West, again in 1568, and subsequently there have been more than 50,000 Unitarians in Transylvania. Transylvania is a region of Romania. I come and bring groups from Bedford as often as we are able, and in response we have many visitors that come to Bedford from Transylvania. There is not only one way of being a Unitarian. While we are predominantly humanist in North America, in Transylvania this is clearly a part of a Christian tradition, a very liberal Christian tradition, but it is one that is embraced by many people across all demographics. And it is important for us to realize, particularly for North Americans to realize, that ours is a faith that has its own share of heroes and martyrs, and that the people have actually died for this faith. The principles of religious toleration are ones that have come at a great cost and are important for us to preserve and enhance in our own way.
Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you got a glimpse into the uniqueness of Unitarian Universalism and how its values are similar to our own. Shalom, salam, shanti, peace.